Hi, I'm Daniel Boy. Welcome to the front row. With the COVID situation, fashion industry has been thrown into disarray. Brick and mortar stores have not been able to operate because of the lockdown. Fashion weeks have not been able to operate because there's been a lockdown on shows. So everyone's been trying to innovate. Everyone's been trying to pivot. We've seen brands trying to go onto the digital platform. Fashion weeks trying to pivot onto the digital platform, but has it really worked? So today we're going to discuss the digitalization of fashion, and I have two wonderful guests with us, Nikki Bruce and Nick Tan. Welcome to the show. All
Uh,
right, Nikki, let's start off with you. Would you like to introduce yourselves and tell our listeners and our audience what you do?
What do I do? At the moment, I'm in Melbourne, so I'm experiencing lockdown fully. We're down in the second round of lockdown now. So I'm working now as a freelancer. People might know me from having worked in Singapore for a long time as a fashion editor and writer. I'm also consulting now with emerging fashion brands that are looking for social media and online presence to be created for them. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now, mostly in my pajamas. I dressed up just for you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nikki. All right, Nick. Nick Tan is with AP Media. Nick, would you like to tell everyone what exactly you do?
well, AP Media does mainly conferences, events, as well as video content. So, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Fantastic. Okay, now people like Nikki and Nick are very, very important in the future of fashion, in the digitalization of fashion, because they straddle two completely different sides of the field. Without the technical expertise of people like Nick, people like us, myself, for instance, as a show producer, would not be able to pivot and make that digitalization journey effectively and smoothly. And without the opinions of fashion editors, we would be completely directionless. So I'm going to start off with you, Nikki Bruce. There have been a lot of
Mm.
shows and a lot of labels and fashion designers who have been trying their very, very to come up with digital content. Were there particulars that you felt were flops, and were there any shows that you enjoyed that you thought were successful?
To be honest, I don't think anybody did it particularly well. The majority of the big brands simply did what I would describe as a fashion film. So it was a kind of a format that already exists, something that's been done by people like Nick Knight, for example, for a very long time. And also very similar to companion films that the designers have released. The only really interesting virtual kind of fashion show or fashion week is what's coming out of Helsinki Fashion Week. They've been virtual since 2016. Originally, it was begun because they wanted to be more environmentally friendly and they didn't want to have all of the waste and energy use and carbon footprint of doing a full fashion week. And they have created a relationship with emerging digital artists who create 360 digital formats and platforms and interesting kinds of film. So, I mean, as I said, the majority of what was coming out of the big brands wasn't that interesting. I mean, everybody knows about Dior and their hideous, non-representational video film thing that they did about myths and legends in the forest. And then, ironically, Dior Men's did very well from a perspective of connecting the artist who created the artwork for the prints with the designer and links to Africa and things. But it was an interview film. It was like a documentary. It wasn't a runway show per se. Prada tried very hard with their blank box, people walking around runway show, not successful. Tokyo Fashion Week tried also. Theirs was slightly interesting in that they did a full runway show, but just without an audience. And then they added more visual and video components to it. But again, nobody really seemed to do anything that was anything different than just somebody sitting front row and filming with their iPhone. So I think there's a lot of room for room for development in the space. I don't think anyone has got it quite right yet. So I'm quite
You
interested
talked
in
about
how you guys. Hmm?
Okay, you talked about Nick Knight earlier. Interestingly enough, you're right. Show Studio was one of the first to experiment with the digitalization of fashion films and all. And Nick Knight
Yeah.
collaborated recently with Valentino. How do you think that went?
I think it was, of all of them, it was probably the best of what was going on. But I also do still feel that it didn't quite give you anything that was entirely new or that gave more than what you might get from attending a show or attending a presentation or a look see or being able to have a sort of a more visceral experience of the event. I think this is going to be the number one thing that all of the brands need to overcome, and that is the
Mhm,
difference between just looking at something through a screen and having a kind of emotional experience or an emotional reaction. To be honest, the
mhm.
most interesting stuff in this space is being done by pop music. So for Beyonce, for example, Black is King. I mean, that was a fashion show with emotion, if you know what I mean. So all of the designers that she was wearing and all of the artists that she was supporting were involved in a three-dimensional 3D experience that gave more than any sort of runway or fashion film I've seen.
Do you think a lot of the labels are still uh, undecided about what works on the digital realm and what doesn't work, and there should be a lot more collaboration with um, experts who are, for example, filmmakers? Do you think there should be a lot more collaboration with filmmakers and with uh, technical experts like how I'm collaborating with Nick Tan? Do you think that's the way to go rather than fashion being uh, isolated and being the be all and know all of fashion? Do you think times have
Yeah,
changed?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, fashion's been working with various directors for years, whether they've been doing
Hmm.
um, sort of documentary shows or working to do fashion films. I think it's less about um, working with other people from the creative side and more about looking at the technology. So you just have to look at things like TikTok and see how TikTok is a very basic format of technology, but it has eaten into the fashion side of Instagram, for example, to the extent where Instagram's now released reels so that they can copy. It's the new technologies and the new platforms that need to be explored. The biggest issue, I think, is that a lot of these big brands, they have their online stores, they make virtual films, they've been live streaming like Burberry, they've been live streaming for I don't know how many years now, 10 years or something.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so, all of that stuff should be done and dusted. It should be something they automatically do, and I suspect most of them already do it, especially if you're talking
Mhm.
about the really big brands. Um, what is the point of difference is when you need to look at, say, for example, like the idea of a 360 display, so you see a garment in the 3D angles, and um,
Mhm.
some of the TV stations have tried that with their 360 views of whatever on the red carpet or at the Emmys and things, but it
Yeah.
needs to be a format that is easily consumed by the consumer because
Mhm.
that's who they're supposedly marketing to is the people, not the creatives who have a visual eye.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of creatives, I'm going to throw the next question to you, Nick. As a tech expert, do you watch all these fashion shows and think that all these fashion brands are not taking advantage of the technology that's out there, that what they're doing is completely dated, and that the tech industry has got so much more in their arsenal to offer, but no one's reaching out to you?
Thanks, Daniel. And I agree with both of you actually here as well as Daniel that there's actually a lot of information and technology out there that is untapped. And just to give an example, like we have been doing virtual museums, right? for the last something like 8 to 9 years, and as well as the use of augmented reality in so many different industries. But it is true that like what Nikki has mentioned, that the only way it's being used currently is really more like a 360 video of a runway carpet show, and that's it, and it ends there. So there wasn't really much thoughts on how I could bring this whole show into a virtual environment of which people can then bring into a space. If you guys recall, some years ago, there was something called Second Life or Half Life, where
Yeah.
people can go into the virtual space. Yeah, yeah. So that is a good benchmark and concept where people could actually go and attend something on the digital and virtual space, and then all creative people and tech, or I would call them creative tech, can work together as a collaboration. And I also
Yeah.
agree with Nikki mentioning about like the music industry is doing more. Like for example, the Katy Perry music video where they use extended reality show kind of a showcase on AR and on Instagram, and it was amazing. And that was
Yeah.
used predominantly by your industrial light and magic or Star Wars, but not for fashion. And the way she does it is kind of fashion. So this gives us a lot of inspiration to how we should cross technology with creative. And yes, to Daniel, I did watch quite a bit of fashion films because I always been uh, kind of like connected with this whole industry, and I really like it a lot.
So I do think that uh, there is so much technology. Speaking with you, Nick, I realized that there is a wealth of stuff that we can use for the fashion industry, which hasn't been tapped. And I'm going to draw an example back to Fashion Week. For example, London Fashion Week, which went fully digital recently. Nikki, what did you think of London Fashion Week before we go on and talk about other fashion weeks?
Mm, yeah. Well, I think the worst thing about it all was that it was done it's done so quickly because of the situation with coronavirus, that there was very little information about what was happening, who was doing it, how did you log on, what time was it. So I feel that they were at a little bit of a disadvantage because they were the first to try it,
Yeah.
particularly without having any real, backup behind them. So I give them the benefit of the doubt, but not, I can't. I literally cannot remember a thing. I can't remember anything. The only thing I
Okay,
can
I'm
remember,
gonna.
I don't know. Can I remember Burberry, or was Burberry something like? Seriously, I can't remember. So that's a problem.
I'm gonna rock the boat slightly because this London used to be the epicenter of where all the creatives gathered, and where Show Studio is. They've got people like Nick Knight at their disposal, and a lot of other creatives and all as well. Did you feel that the BFC did not reach out and take advantage of all the talents that they had in the UK, but instead tried to run a fashion week without full knowledge of how digital
Yeah, but
works?
I agree. But I mean, as I pointed out earlier, just before, they didn't have a lot of time. So, I
Right.
mean, who knows when his night was? I mean, he could have been in America. Who knows? He could have been in lockdown. So, I think
Yeah.
that for them in particular, it was very short
Hmm.
notice. And I feel
Right.
that, as I said, give them the benefit of the doubt. I suspect, however, that next season everything will be very different. And I feel that this will be true for a lot of the different fashion weeks, although Paris is saying that they are inviting people and they're doing runway shows.
Yeah.
I do feel, though, that it's going to be a very reduced number of attendees. I think that,
Hmm.
um, I mean, a lot of influencers won't travel. Americans aren't allowed into Europe. Australians can't
Yeah.
get out of the country. So I feel that it would be a reduced number
Oh
of
dear.
attendees,
Yeah.
which I actually think is a good thing because currently, currently Fashion Weeks bore me to tears because there's just nothing new. The clothes are boring, the people are boring, social media is boring, everything's just deadly dull, and it's much more interesting to spend a couple of hours scrolling through Instagram to find an emerging brand doing something weird
Mhm.
than it is to have a look at the same people running down the same catwalks wearing the same clothes over and over again. So I feel that this whole sort of idea of fashion being able to be virtual is actually
Mhm.
something that the industry's been heading to for a long time. I mean, you've got your issues with environmentalism, you've got your issues with carbon footprint of hundreds of people flying around all the time just to sit on the front row for 15
Yeah.
minutes. So I think it's going to change, and I think it's an opportunity now for people who have the technology and the ideas to be able to set it up in such a way that they can give that emotion and they can give that feeling of excitement in such a way that it works. So, whoever does it best first will be the
Mhm.
winner overall, I feel.
Do you think this is going to, well, this meaning COVID, is going to spell the death knell for fashion weeks? Okay. For example, in New York Fashion Week is greatly condensed. It's September 14th to 16th. A lot of
Yeah.
major designers are not showing. In Milan, there are 28 designers showing, including Fendi and Prada. But on the other side of the fence, you have, for example, LV that just showed in Shanghai. Outside of fashion
Mm.
season, outside of fashion cities, and they showed in a place that was corona free, and they not only invited media but they also invited customers. Half the
Yeah.
people who were watching
Yeah.
the show were
So I'm,
customers. So they've completely broken the mold of fashion week. And then you get brands like Supreme. Now, Supreme has not had to rely on fashion shows, magazines, wholesale, and yet they're insanely successful. So, do you think fashion
Mhm.
weeks are on its way out, or it is
Look,
already passé?
I think in many cases it's already passé to a certain extent. I feel that it will drag on for quite a few more seasons. But I do have a feeling that it's going to reduce. So it will get back to the core of what a fashion week was or a fashion show was, which was
Mm.
customers sitting in the front row, marking down the looks that they're going to buy and having a personal
Right.
relationship with the designer or, the designer. So my hope is that we will get away from all of excess and, rocket ships and all the other things that people do, and return to the idea of what the runway show is supposed to be. It is to show the clothes on a body so that you can order them. So I think that that also ties in with, the current sort of distaste now for
Mm.
obvious luxury or symbols of obvious luxury, the distaste for fast fashion, which is getting itself,
Yeah.
quite a bad reputation. You have a younger market coming through who won't buy labels, but who will buy vintage labels, or they will get something made by somebody down the street. You have the whole slow fashion movement, which is coming, and it's really
Yeah.
strong down here in Australia, for example. So I do sort of feel like the tide has turned to a certain extent. I think there's going to
Right.
be a continuation for many years still, trying to sort out, the circular economy and sorting out
Hmm.
situations like, ethical manufacturing and sustainable fabrics and all of these sorts of things. But I do feel that I hope at least that this is a good turning point so that, we can move away from the sort of excesses that we've seen over the last 10 years where runway shows have turned into free-for-alls and, screaming crowds and people being run over by cars and K-pop stars. And, I just think people are sort of thinking, well, we can die from a flu now. We can, we can't fly. We can't leave the country. We should be supporting local. I think that's another big thing. I think people are much more interested in supporting small business, local business, but also we have the benefits of the technology. So we can order from online if we want to. We can, have a personal conversation with the designer. We can ask for a bespoke item with a smaller brand. So the technology helps. We just need to use what we can in a way that hopefully makes everything better for everybody rather than just huge amounts of money in the big six and nobody else getting it.
Sure. I mean, uh, you've just talked about a lot of very, very valid points, and those are the exact reasons why we started the front row. I mean, to quote Susie Menkins, fashion weeks have become a circus, and we realized that as well. And it was during lockdown that we talked about everything that we discussed. I remember having a conversation with you on Zoom, and we talked about the same
Yeah.
thing. And I think it was one of those conversations that led to the conceptualization of the front row. So thank you, Nikki. And before you grill me about the front row, I'm gonna take a swig of my alcohol first.
Okay, you do that. I'm going to turn my light on because you know it's dark here. We have winter. Hang
Yeah.
on.
All right. Okay. Whilst we're waiting for Nikki, just to let you know, Nick and I have been collaborating on the front row because I'm a show producer. I'm very familiar with creating physical shows. The digital realm is completely alien to me, and we just ended up collaborating because I needed a tech partner, and Nick was just there, and he reached out. So let me ask you, Nick. What were the thoughts that were going through your mind when I suggested doing a completely digital fashion week to you? Did you think, wow, let's pick up the challenge, let's do it, or oh my god, you're completely nuts?
Well, to be honest, first of all, I want to applaud, like, show producers and fashion creative directors like Dana Boy who actually looked into digital. In fact, this whole concept was kind of like mutual because I knew Daniel for quite a while, and he's always in the media when it comes to fashion, and he has mentored and nurtured many young designers to become to who they are and and how they became, where they are right now. And and so I was toying, since it's in times of COVID, we're all in a lockdown. What else could we do? Which other industries that I actually feel that passionately about that it has to change. So the first thing that came to my mind was actually denim, and I was thinking like hey, maybe fashion can do something about it because exactly like what Nikki you mentioned, I don't see much people actually doing much things. There's a lot of bunch of fashion shows, they spend really ridiculous amount of money and resources on that, and it ends there. So we then have a whole new tech wave of e-commerce platforms that come into the whole space, but it doesn't really serve to the luxury brands and giving additional information to the buyers and stuff like that. So it actually defeats the purpose in some sense. And so the thought of like doing a virtual fashion was quite interesting when I brought this whole concept of virtual conference to Daniel. Daniel was like, "Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Let's do something." So that is kind of like I guess is like-minded at track at that point of time. And when we came together, I didn't actually felt like, oh no, God, what have I got myself into? It was more like, oh, this is really fun. I'm gonna do something really exciting and that can really help to change. And and to my surprise, Daniel's reaction was like the same. So I guess that helps a lot when both parties has that kind of a like-mindedness to really make something really that's
Yeah.
different rather than just a fashion film. It's actually a fashion festival in a 360 virtual environment, which has been actually done many years back in the museums.
Yeah. You know what I'm really interested in is finding out how
Um,
the
and it's people like Nick and Nikki sitting down during the pandemic, sitting down during the lockdown, and getting ideas from them, getting feedback from them, that gave us the courage and pushed us into starting something like the front row. So for those of you who have joined us, we are midway through our 1 hour podcast talking about the digitalization of fashion. And and it is at this point that I'm going to be opening myself up to the firing squad. Nikki, do you want to know anything about the front row?
well, I mean, I actually have a question for Nick first because I think
Okay.
I know your background and your experience in doing shows. What I'm really interested in finding out is how the technology that Nick's created will operate in this space. Like I've got all kinds of images in my head of of how will I be seeing three dimensions around a space or a model or do you know what I mean? So I kind of want to know how it all works.
Well, have you been to any virtual museums like those in Paris? Okay, so
Mm,
basically, have you seen those
I
Google Maps?
yeah, yeah, okay.
So now imagine the website portal being a kind of like a nice visualization of a Google map done in
Uh-huh.
fashion colors. Then you can move in that space and then hey, I saw a store here. I enter and I see a fashion film.
Well,
I can
okay,
see the designers work and I can
so it's
buy
a
it.
little bit more so it's a little bit more like augmented reality.
Well, it's actually still called 360 virtual reality, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
So it's
very
technically
excited.
a, so in a nutshell, with today's mobile technology of having able to go to any sites that you can see anytime, anywhere, I guess it enables people to somewhat virtually travel to a space. In fact, it also open up doors to bringing viewers into a 3D dimension, a three-dimensional space to watch a virtual film, rather than just watching
Mhm,
a film by itself.
mhm.
So it offers a lot
Interesting.
more.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm really interested to see how it all works. Daniel?
We're in the fourth day of the festival already, and we've had lots of films and all that. So people have been very excited about how we have presented the shows and all. So it's been a learning curve for me, and I think it's been a learning curve for Nick as well and his team. We watched a lot of fashion shows. We followed a lot of these digital festivals and all, and good or bad, you learn from them. We learn what didn't work. We pick up on what really worked. One of the shows which I really liked very much was the MS show, and I showed that clip to Nick, and I said that it's a fashion film. It tells a fashion story, but at the same time, the stars of this fashion film are the clothes. You go through this entire fashion film, but you walk away with an essence of what these clothes are, what they're presenting. You see a 360, the front, the back of the outfit, and I think that's what we were trying to create. Because at the end of the day, we are telling the stories of the designers, but we want to be able
Yeah.
to tell the story through the clothes. You can interview someone and they can talk to the cows come home, but if you don't see the clothes, you don't see the print, you don't see the details, was as good as not seeing anything, not having any visuals. So that was something that I worked very hard with the team on trying to create, and talking about Helsinki Fashion Week, Copenhagen Fashion Week as well. I think
Mhm.
eco-friendly, sustainable, inclusive, responsible. These are the buzzwords for the future, and I think the future of fashion labels, lie in labels that embrace these philosophies. But okay, Nikki, let me ask you. Coming into a digital fashion week like the front row, are there things that you want to see and things that you don't want to see?
Yes. I don't want to see a runway with like empty seats or like weird graphic people. Um, I want to see something that tries to at least touch the emotions, tries to at least create a feeling of excitement. I want to see the clothes. I'm not that interested in the models per se, but I want to see what the clothes look like. I'd like to be able to see, what the colors are, close up of textures, the kinds of things that you might see in a re-see maybe. I'm also, like I said, I'm also hoping to see good and interesting fashion as well. So I'd like to see how they manage to get their story across. So so I know most of the brands that you have in your in the front row. Um, I'm interested to see how some of our regional friends do. So, for example, Jude from Melbourne, who I've seen his runway show in real life, and it was amazing because it was a very close-up show, very intimate, much more like a dance performance or a theatre performance. So I'm very interested to see how that translates into a virtual space. I'm also very interested to see what the Philippine designers are doing because I know that they have some very creative visual artists in that space.
Yes.
Um, yeah, overall, I'm just very interested to see things that I can't see because I'm stuck in Melbourne, locked down. Um, and yeah, so I'm also very interested in how the front row is operating with like the storefronts or the different rooms that you have. I think that will be interesting to see how that works. I'm hoping for a seamless experience, which I'm pretty sure, I mean, it's not like um, people will be um, having to sort of like download and watch it via sort of dial up or anything. So everyone better have their data plan sorted out.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think those are the things I'm hoping for. Yeah, and and also, it'd be interesting to see what sort of interest you get globally as well. How where the views are coming from, who's watching, because obviously the front row is being established as a long-term platform as well, something that can operate as almost like a virtual showroom. My understanding is
Hmm.
that's right, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, so those are things I'm looking forward to, and also experiencing obviously the whole virtual thing.
Well, I mean, I hope we tick all those boxes for you. We are Sunday, fourth day of the festival right now, and all the shows that you're looking forward to are coming up tomorrow. We have the NAFA show, and Jude's show is on Thursday the 27th, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking forward to Jude's show as well, and thank you very
Yeah.
much, Nikki, for introducing Jude to me. His philosophy is just absolutely amazing, and his uh, his vision towards sustainability is absolutely amazing. In fact, yesterday we had a chat with Jude on our podcast about sustainability, and he had some really interesting insights into that as well. So if
Yeah.
you want to watch this video, all these videos are the archives of the front row. You can go back and revisit your favorite shows, revisit your favorite podcasts or your workshops. You can watch them over and over again because the more you listen to it, all our guests have got amazing, interesting insights. The more you listen to it, you're going to be picking up a lot of wonderful tips from them. Uh, so let's move on from the content of the front row to creating the front row. And again, I'm going to throw myself under the bus right now by asking Nick this question. What were the difficulties of working with fashion creatives? And I need to take another swig.
Hey, for a start, the space where you can watch the films and replay them in the archive room is all in a runway room. And I think for start, the challenge is actually not so much of working with fashion creative. The challenge is how do we get all these various disciplines into the whole picture where you have the broadcast, you have the live stream, you have the 360, you have the technology chatbot, the wife and the wireless broadband services together with fashion creative, fashion films, productions, live stream, all into one space and yet have a seamless experience. Because what I learned when doing virtual conferences or virtual museums and showcases, it's the amalgamation of the whole various type of discipline, like what Daniel has mentioned earlier on. And I thought that to me is the biggest challenge because everyone speaks different language, like everyone. Like a social media person will talk differently from a designer, they will talk differently from a tech person, and the tech person will be giving an instruction that nobody knows what he's talking about, and we have to decode that. And then you have fashion director where like Daniel Boyd who actually knows exactly what he wants, and then we have to then now all translate it into words in five different so-called languages. So you can start to imagine the amount of information we have to process. So I feel like we are trying to build a supercomputer in-house.
fashion directors throwing hissy fits every hour of the day, saying, "Nick, but you don't understand fashion." But at the end of the day,
Daniel,
he when I tell him, "Nick, you don't understand fashion," he turns around and says, "But Daniel, you don't understand tech." So we are all learning. We are all in this journey together, and we're all learning. And at the end of the day, the more information we get, the stronger we become as creatives, and the stronger that collaboration is going to be. So I am really, I am really excited about what we've done for
Nikki has a
the
question.
front row. Yes, Nikki, you have a
Daniel,
question.
I just wanted to say that I think it's also quite interesting how the two of you, have managed to put this together in a very short time. So I understand it's literally like 4 months from beginning to end.
It's much
So
lesser.
Yeah,
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 yeah. So
yeah.
it's interesting how, even though you've had all the different languages to speak, you've still managed to put it all together in such a short amount of time. So, Daniel, did you have a really strong outline of what you wanted to provide on as part of it, of the front row, before you went to Nick, or did you just have some ideas and then Nick said, "Oh, we can do A, B, C, D"?
Well, I mean, Nikki, you know me, and you know what a tyrant I can be, right? So I really had strong ideas of what I wanted a virtual fashion festival to be like. We spoke about it, and as you correctly pointed out, it 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 has to replicate and be as true as possible to the kind of experience that people get from a live event. Which is why when Nick told me about the 360, okay, this is how he explained it to me. Imagine you're in a computer game and you're moving from room to room and space to space, and I got it. But that's exactly the kind of experience that you want to recreate, rather than just a 2D platform and you click and a show appears, you click and a talk appears. It has to be interactive, it has to be exciting, and at the same time, the creatives had to be the stars. The designers had to be stars. If we're doing a fashion exhibition, the photographer's work had to be front and center of everything. It's not about champagne parties. It's not about influencers wearing outrageous clothes and getting photographed on the street. I think that was what contributed to the it being called the circus of fashion. So
Mhm.
when we put all that together, yes, I did have very clear ideas as to what I wanted out of it. But because I had a really strong collaborator, it was very easy to try and translate these into the digital realm without losing too much of it. And in fact, they had some fantastic ideas that improved on my original ideas, and that I think is key to a successful collaboration. And speaking with people like you, Nikki, who gave your viewpoint from what the media wants, a fashion insider, what they want to see from a fashion week. I think all these helped us shape this, and thus we could put it together in a matter of weeks, not months.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, actually, to be honest, I look at it is that while the production timeline is short, the truth of the matter is I can tell that deep down inside Daniel, he already has this digital mind since a long time ago.
Thank you very much, Nick.
And and for us, we have been doing this. So, when we have to pivot during this COVID times, well, I guess in that sense, that thought process is already pre-managed. You know what I mean? Like, Nikki, usually when people want to conceptualize something, they take months to just think about things. But in this case, both of us already had that somewhat same task. And that actually helps to cut short the whole process, in my opinion.
yeah. So I think
Yeah.
overall it's really interesting to see how everything comes together. And yeah, I'm so excited to see.
Nick, I've been throwing you all these questions and all that. Do you have any questions for us, for
Yes,
Nikki?
I have.
Oh dear.
So, so Daniel, like, you have always been in the media for fashion. You do shows. You also work with brands, designers, like everyone that I know, that I seem to know that you know them too. Just kidding. So, how do you actually manage what the media wants, like what Nikki wants, versus what the designers want. Because, after working with them, this is two different set of people with two different minds.
Okay, in the normal world, pre-COVID, it's a problem that we tackle all the time because designers would want something out of their show, and it's a matter of trying to convince them that their ideas may not work on the runway. The media would want something out of the shows with a complete linked with what the designers want. But in a case like this, where the entire digital landscape is so new to everyone, from designers to some of the media. Nikki is an exception. Nikki is a person who is very, very in tune with what's going on the ground. So in order to help the designers and address their problems and try to convince them that their ideas may not work on the digital realm, you have to be as informed as possible. And the only way to be informed is to study and to learn as much as you can. I had to study during the lockdown and learn as much as I could from yourself about the digital realm, about what works, what doesn't work. And it's also a matter of me having to compromise my ideas. Some of the ideas that I had may work better on the physical stage, may not translate so well on the digital realm. Some of the ideas that you had may not look so good for fashion. So it's a matter of an open dialogue. You have an open dialogue, you have creatives who completely trust each other, partners who completely trust each other, and take that ego away. It's not about if I don't like your idea, it means that you're a bad creative. At the end of the day, we have ideas. If they work, they work. If they don't work, maybe we'll revisit the idea during the second edition, the third edition of the front row. At the end of the day, work with the collaborator to come together to work with designers to try and execute the best way of the best or interpreting the best ideas that work for the digital realm. And I think I have COVID to thank for that because everyone is so uncertain, myself included. So that's a really great question, Nick, because it's something that we struggle with all the time, and it's a matter of all of us coming together and wanting the best for the show, and I think we've addressed that for the front row. I'm quite proud of the content that we've all done, and I'm really quite proud of the content that our regional designers have put together as well. Every single show is different, every single workshop is different, and I think I attribute that to um, having an open door policy with all the creatives. Everybody is free to contribute. No idea is bad. It's just a matter of whether the idea works for the digital realm or not. Do you agree with me?
I totally agree with you. So my question for Nikki is actually she already answered it because I wanted to ask Nikki, from again just earlier on you mentioned that fashion actually has already fashion weeks itself, should be more for the designers to showcase their work to the customers on the front row because I wanted to ask you the fundamental of fashion show, which you already kind of answered when Daniel was asking you the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we talked about historically what a fashion show was really about, but I think these days a fashion show is less specifically about that object of the clothing, but it's more about the building of a brand and the creating a sense of relationship with the viewer or the customer, and creating, the magic and the wonder that used to be there. And I think that that's where the virtual world can help. I mean, that you see. I saw this movie the other day. What was it? Ready Player One. This is how bad my lockdown has got. But it was fascinating because a great film because it's fascinating because they lived their lives entirely virtually, and clothing and hair and makeup and fashion and music and dancing and all of these things were all intrinsically done inside the world of the virtual world. And I suspect that as technology develops, we will get that way. Oh, Daniel, I have to tell you this. There is a brand that launched in the US, no, the UK, that is selling garments just for Instagram. So you buy a dress and you send
Right.
off a picture of yourself, and the graphic artist puts the dress on your picture, and then you post it on Instagram. And yet then you pay
Wow.
£60. And the idea behind this concept is that you don't buy fast fashion, you don't have too many bits of clothing, you know, knocking around in your house. You don't create
Yeah.
more landfill, but you still get to have a new dress for Instagram. And I was just blown away. I was like, wow, like the headspace. Unfortunately, the designs are really ugly. They look like sci-fi stars, but still,
Oh,
the
right, right.
concept, the
The
concept.
concept is interesting, right? Yeah. Once they get their head around the aesthetics of the fashion, I think it could really take off.
I
Yes, I
mean,
agree
remember,
actually.
yeah, remember when who was it? Was it Dior or LV? Can't remember. LV, when they made their own, they used an avatar as their advertising for their advertising
Yes,
campaign.
yes, that's right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then in Singapore, we now have our very own. I think there are two um, avatars who are now are influencers who are completely digital. So Nicole Wong, NC Wong, has created one,
Yeah.
which is so cool because you can see a picture of her, a real life her, doing things with her avatar that she created. So the lines are already very blurred. I think when it comes to
Yeah.
fashion, so it's just going to continue. I think to be that way.
I,
So Nick,
I totally
you're in a
agree.
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry, you're saying.
Yeah, so Nick's in a great position to, be able to do all of these things, and I think it's fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. Mentioned about the Ready Player One because, like recently I also came across a game that is called Cyberpunk. It launched by one of the world's largest game company. They work with
Yeah.
some of the top musicians in Europe. They have to create music for the virtual avatar that's created for the game, and the whole fashion, culture, research, and it's all entirely a game. They got Keanu Reeves inside, and you can start to imagine that virtual space that we just, me and Daniel just step in. There's a lot of things that we can do. It's kind of
Yeah.
limitless.
Mhm.
So I think there's no doubt that digitalization of fashion is very important, and it will play a very, very, very big part in the future of fashion. So before we end off this chat, because the front row is a B2C platform, and you can go on and look at the clothes, and anything that you see, you can buy directly from the designers. I have a question about e-commerce for Nikki, okay, specifically luxury e-commerce. Now, the question is luxury e-commerce still booming? And I'm going to refer to a quote from Business of Fashion. The worst quarter in the history of modern luxury business was also its best ever for digital sales. For example, Prada's digital sales doubled and Bottega's tripled. But e commerce only accounts for a very small share of businesses amongst luxury players. For example, Kering's e commerce sales grew 72% in the second quarter, but only accounted for 18% of retail sales. Now, Nikki, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that people are gonna start pivoting towards e-commerce for luxury and abandon brick and mortar stores?
Um, I think it'll be very interesting because, to be honest, um, luxury doesn't do very well online. It never has. I mean, partially because people are worried about delivery, they're worried about quality. Also because they really want the experience of shopping in that brand. That's why they go to Chanel. They go to Chanel for the experience of shopping in Chanel. It's at home in your bedroom in your pajamas. It's not quite the same thing. Um, and these are the
They could be
reasons
Chanel
why.
pajamas.
Yeah. But these are the reasons why brands like Chanel do not currently or haven't had online stores or online shopping components, because they see it as being taking away from what the core of the brand is, similar to Hermes and sort of a few of the other brands that were very slow to go online. So I think that the big luxury brands will be losing out from the perspective of small leather goods, the entry level products, because people who can afford to fly in a private jet and use the VIP room in Paris at Chanel can still do that with or without the whole COVID thing. But they're going
Yeah.
to lose out on this, the entry level people, the people who actually buy the products that gives them the cash to be able to put on the shows. So I do feel that that's a big issue. The other area in that space is fine jewelry. So,
Mhm.
Net-a-Porter, for example, has been able to sell fine jewelry to a certain extent. They have had very expensive pieces on there, $40,000, $50,000 jewelry pieces, but these are very few and far between, and they're not something that the average shopper is going to sort of be involved with. So I feel that coming to now, when people they are stuck at home, they aren't traveling, the other side, of course, is because of all the airlines being cancelled, delivery has become very, very slow. So it's much more difficult now to order something from, say, Net-a-Porter UK to have it delivered in Australia or even Singapore, because there aren't enough flights. And this goes for everything. So things that used to take 24 hours, 48 hours for delivery are now taking 2 weeks. So I feel
Right.
that that part of the online retail component is something that is in a bit of a shake-up anyway. You have situations like with Amazon, for example, where Amazon is sort of um, in the US, that there's this issue of not being enough post people working in the post office, and Amazon still uses the post office. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's a real concern, which is why I think things like this idea of buying a virtual outfit for your Instagram account, that's actually very clever, because you don't have to wait for the delivery to take 2 weeks to get to your house so that you can try it on. It doesn't matter anymore. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do feel that the luxury brands are going to have a very hard time trying to translate that the money they used to make with the walk-ins, the entry levels, into
Sure.
online sales. Yeah,
But
I think maybe
yes, Nikki.
I think maybe it might work if they become a little bit more open to the idea of selling. If they can create something with technology where you get a registered stamps of a digital stamp saying this is an original, or I don't know. They need to create that sense of having that luxury experience, and I think that's where things like virtual technology may help. But who knows?
Sure. Right. You talked about Net-a-Porter earlier on. Incidentally, Farfetch sales soared during the lockdown. The total value of products sold surged to 48% year on year to 721 million Singapore dollars in the second quarter, which equates to 365 million in revenue for the company. So Farfetch isn't doing too badly. But going back to the entire experience of the fashion shopping in a luxury label, look at Burberry. Burberry are at the forefront of digital innovation, as correctly pointed out earlier on. Now, they have opened their very first social retail store. I have no idea what a social retail store is, but it's open in Shenzhen, and it's developed in collaboration with WeChat. And it seems that it integrates gaming, social media, e-commerce, and it can all be accessed from home and in the store. Do you think that this is going to pave the way for the store of the future?
I think that, yeah, I think brands that can offer a point of differentiation rather than just a click and buy, they will have a leg up. But I think also it's all about the brand knowledge. So in Shenzhen, in China, people know everything there is to know about Burberry. So they don't
Right.
necessarily have to see something to know what the quality should be and how it should feel. Um, I think that um, what were you just talking about? Then,
Burberry's
no,
social
no,
retail store.
the brand before that, the online store, Sense something,
Oh,
just before
Farfetch,
Burberry.
Farfetch,
Farfetch. I'm
Farfetch.
thinking of Sense.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing about
Oh,
Farfetch, which is interesting, is because Farfetch is actually an aggregator. So Farfetch offers online
mhm.
deliverability for small boutiques or small brands.
Yeah,
So again, it's got that point of difference. So I can understand why. Also, it's based in the US, which means that the issues of international delivery were not a problem. So I can also understand why people were starting to, if they're desperately looking for a brand, Farfetch can
mhm.
find it wherever it is in the United States and in
Right.
that space in North America and get it to you eventually. So again, it's a different kind of format than just a point and click. So I do feel that having a point of difference and having that technology that allows you to be able to offer something that nobody else has, that is going to be how a brand will succeed. And I mean, Burberry has been ahead of the pack. I mean, for years,
Yeah,
and it's always been very technological. It was the first brand to get 1 million followers on Facebook. I mean, way back in the
yeah,
day. So they're always somebody to keep an eye on when it comes to fashion and technology and outreach and interactivity in communities. So yeah, interesting.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's all thanks to the foresight of Christopher Bailey then. All right. My next question, my final question is for Nick. With all these things that are happening in the digital realm, and we talked about Burberry and their social retail store. As a tech person, are you excited by the possibility of the things that you could be doing with the fashion industry in the future?
Thanks, Daniel. I look at it is that there's really a lot to do. What Burberry did in Shenzhen to launch the social e-commerce shop, it's not something that many brands or retailers can really do because it's really a lot of cost involved in building this whole structure. Essentially, I'm still bringing you the physical shop. On top of that, I add on social media and gamification, that can share to people. That is it. So, and China, we all know, it has a huge consumer market. What happens to the other AFNL brands, which, like, I think I've seen the research by McKinsey saying that the AFNL industry, the luxury industry,
Yeah,
has to really, change. And they mentioned a quote, digitization is not a panacea. So what can you do? So I would think from my little perspective, the way I look at it is that there is a lot to be done. The key to luxury goods, right? It's about personalization and about the storytelling. And the one way to get kind of e-commerce shop is not making the cut because nowadays people think about digital platform. What do you think of? You think of discount codes. You
yeah,
think about the latest offers that you can give me, and that's it. But when you go to an actual retail shop, what do you get? You get experience, you get personalization, you get someone telling you the story of this fabric and this stitch and this button come from somewhere, right? What happened to all that? To be honest, I think for the AFNL industry, they just need to dig back into the fundamental of why they exist in the first place and translate that to the consumers using basic technology. Give an example. Instead of what Farfetch is doing of like with Burberry, right? Why can't any brands bring you into a virtual experience, launch a chat of a sales assistant talking to you? And it's nothing new. It's not even like rocket science tech, it's existing tech. And then I bring you through this fabric, the sales can see you whether it's a virtual or not. So you would bother to dress up, right? And they can capture this, share it to social. And yet, they can tell you what the brand can do. I would pay for it, but no one is doing it. So I would think that for the AFML industry to catch up, they have to really dig down to fundamental and use digital technology to their advantage, rather than using this word digitization loosely and e-commerce as just a platform.
So actually, you know what, words of wisdom from our two guests, Nick and Nikki today. From what I take away from this, digitalization is going uh, to be a very, very important part of the fashion industry, but we are just only starting to scrape the surface of what technology can offer and what technology can collaborate with the fashion industry to do. You know, there's so many things that could be explored. There's so many things that could be done. And with that, would like to conclude that digitalization is important, and without digitalization, there won't be the front row. So, thank you very much, Nick, and thank you very much, Nikki, for joining us today. From what we've heard, it's absolutely clear that digitalization of fashion is going to play a very, very important part in our future. But from listening to what Nick has to say, we are only scraping the top of the potential that fashion and tech could literally collaborate to create amazing things for the future. With that, thank you very much. I'm Daniel Boy for the front row. I hope you stay on to enjoy the rest of the very exciting shows, workshops, and whatever we have in store for you, and to spend time navigating our site. Till the next podcast, see you.